안녕하십니까? 제19회 제주 포럼에 참석해주신 여러분. 지금부터 아세안이 바라보는 강대국과 강대국 경쟁 세션을 시작하겠습니다. 원활한 행사 진행을 위해서 휴대전화는 매너 모드로 전환해 주시길 바랍니다. 본 행사는 한국어, 영어로 동시 진행됩니다. 통역을 원하시는 분들께서는 자리에 놓여진 통역기를 착용하시기 바랍니다. 한국어는 1번, 영어는 2번입니다.
Please make sure your cell phone is either off or on silent mode. Korean and English simultaneous interpretation is provided in this session. If you want an interpretation, please wear an interpretation receiver that is placed in your seat. Korean is channel 1. English is channel 2.
Is it okay to start? Is it okay? Yeah. Well, thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the session based on the topic Superpowers and Superpower Competition as ASEAN sees it. I'm not sure. Do they usually use the terminology superpowers these days? I don't know. Anyhow, I'm Dr. Tae-Hwan Kim. I was a professor at the Korean National Diplomatic Academy, but no longer. I'm retired last December. Currently as an honorary professor at the Korean National Diplomatic Academy. I'm so much, although I'm not an expert on Southeast Asia region, but I'm so much honored to have this invaluable opportunity to moderate the session with our distinguished panels, 4 panels. Great power competition is back in the lexicon of world politics again. The return of great power nods to the reality, today's reality, that the United States no longer as influential as it was at the end of the Cold War, when its margin of hard power preeminence was much more significant than now. This also testifies to that we are witnessing a great flux, great change in distribution of material capabilities across the globe, which is, I believe, an important pillar of international order. Due in great part, I believe again, to the rise of so-called non-Western rest, including, of course, China, India, and ASEAN countries. Southeast Asia has been actually emerging as crucial geopolitical as well as a geoeconomic hotspot. ASEAN countries, with their great economic potential in terms both of material and human capital, as the epicenter of growth in the Indo-Pacific region, even being considered by many people as an alternative to China in terms of both production and investment. But no less importantly, that I believe it's the heartland. This is a very conventional geopolitical terminology, heartland of the Indo-Pacific. The United States and China, they're vying for influence over ASEAN countries, striving to attract those countries, ASEAN countries, to their size against the other. But that's, I believe, it's a reality today. So the question is that how ASEAN nations, how do they perceive and view the great powers, particularly the United States and China? How they perceive the great power competition, the Washington-Beijing rivalry? How do they wisely, navigate the tough wave of Sino-American rivalry? What are their strategies? What are their choices? But this session is particularly intended to discuss the perception and views of ASEAN countries on great powers and great power competition unfolding today in front of our eyes. Okay? So to discuss this, I think is a very important and timely subject. We have invited 4 distinguished panelists. Starting from to my left, we have Kekhamol Pitak Dumnongkit, Karen, Karen, senior fellow. She is senior fellow and head of Center for Multilateralism Studies, Rajaratnam School of International Studies, Nanyang Technological University, Singapore. But she's actually from Thailand. Her mother country is Thailand. And next, we have Mr. Ng Nguyen Hung Son. He is the Vice President, Diplomatic Academy of Vietnam in charge of research. And we have Guo Ching Shui. Wow, it's not that easy to pronounce correctly. He is professor at the Institute of Malaysian International Studies, ICMAS, National University of Malaysia. And last but not least, we have Dr. Lee Jae-hyun. He's an old friend of mine. He's currently principal fellow at the ASEAN Institute for Policy Studies. We have altogether a 90-minute session. This session is 90 minutes long. So we're going to first hear each panel presenting initial presentation, make an initial presentation, approximately like based on your talking points. Very, short and brief, approximately 5 minutes, okay? And then after initial presentations of 4 panels, we're gonna go to question and answer round. Would it be okay? Okay. So first, I'm gonna invite to Karen to make your presentation first. Please, Karen.
Thank you, Professor Kim, and very much for your introduction. I'd like to thank also the East Asia Foundation for inviting me to this prestigious event. So I break down my presentation to 3 parts: expectation from the US and China as far as ASEAN is concerned. The second part is going to be about doubts over these 2 great powers, and I'll end my presentation with how ASEAN have navigated in this environment and also what would be ways forward. So starting with expectation. So the expectation from ASEAN nations is that we expect both China and US to continue to be our major trading and investment partners. As you know, China is our number 1 on the trade front, while the US is our number 1 on the investment front in a cumulative term. Right? Just a small note on US investment into the region. Many of you probably look at the data and see that most of US investment going to the region mostly goes to Singapore. However, if you track that money, US does invest in Singapore, and then Singapore invests again in other individual ASEAN countries. So the US investment into individual ASEAN countries actually is greater than what appears on the paper. The second expectation is that we expect to reap the benefit of the US-China rivalry through the ASEAN +1 strategy adopted by businesses who want to diversify away from Beijing. Right? So we are seeing an investment windfall into Thailand, into Malaysia, and into Vietnam as an example. Also, we expect the superpower competition to deepen in existing areas and to widen to other issue areas as well. What I mean by deepening in existing area, I'm talking about the cutting-edge technology sector, which, as you know, the US rolled out its 7 October rule in 2022, and that rule turned out to be imperfect because China was able to make headways by making its own Kirin chip, which is about 7 nanometer in size, right? And now the US is trying to double down its effort on that front by inviting or courting some other players, such as Germany and South Korea, to join its export control regime. And also what I mean by the the competition to expand to other areas. I'm talking about the legacy chips or larger chips because the US is now beginning to talk about how to enlarge its export control regime to cover much larger chips. And if that happens, it's going to affect ASEAN countries big time because we are the regional production hub of cars and electrical and electronic products, which larger chips are part of their supply chains. Okay, the second part is about doubts over the US and China. I listed 2 doubts. So the first doubt is about the fact that we doubt that the superpower competition will get better because whoever's going to win the US election in November, either Trump or Biden, his administration will ramp up its effort to outcompete China, to put pressure on Chinese tech sector even more. And not only that, I think either administration will likely impose more punitive trade and investment measures on Beijing. And also beyond that, both administration will double down its effort to beef up US domestic capacity through reshoring or friendshoring, that kind of strategy that we already heard of. The second doubt is that we doubt that US and China will assume effective leadership in regional and global governance. Right? We're seeing evidence everywhere. We're seeing that China is very assertive in the high sea. We're seeing that it has been dragging its feet on the negotiation of code of conduct in the South China Sea. Right? We also see the US and Chinese slapping tariffs on each other, and that is actually a violation of WTO principle of non-discrimination. And we also see the US use its veto power at the UN Security Council to block the Palestinian Authority from joining the UN. Right? So that's why we doubt that these 2 superpowers will provide effective leadership as far as governance is concerned. So what have ASEAN done to cope with this environment and what will be way forward? Right? So many ASEAN country rule books now, the playbook now is that we try to not choose sides, or it comes in many forms, hedging, or you can say balancing act, or even non-alignment policy, right? But we are aware that the space to navigate in that, to continue to implement the not choosing side policy is shrinking. We may not be able to do so in the future. So another method that we use to cope in this environment is to deepen our regional economic integration. So we have many projects underway, such as linking QR code payment among ASEAN economies, a project to establish a secure network of undersea cable, and also we have project about to shape the role of AI going forward. So with this deepening economic integration, we hope to galvanize our regional economic security and resilience and help us better weather through uncertainties generated by the US-China rivalry. And I'd like to end my presentation with the note on ways forward. I think going forward in this situation, we ASEAN member states need to work more with middle power like South Korea to do 3 things. So first, we should work more with South Korea to be more vocal in expressing our interests and needs. We should be more vocal in saying directly to the US and China that their rivalry creates grave consequences, not only on the economy, but on the governance as well. We need to tell them directly that we don't want to see that spat from getting worse. The second thing that we should do more with South Korea is to be more proactive, to play a more proactive role in bridging both US and China together. We can do so by providing platforms for them to meet and communicate, because by having this communication channel, we can lessen the chance of their rivalry going out of control. And the third thing that we can do more with South Korea is to champion multilateralism, is to uphold the international rules-based order. We need to beef up on that front as well. And I'd like to end my presentation here. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Florence. Your presentation was such an effective one. You jammed up very rich contents in a very short time span. Well, thank you very much. But I think it's quite objective and leaning toward, your focus seems to be leaning toward on economic side. Yeah, okay. All right, our second presenter, Nguyen, are you ready? Please.
Well, thank you very much, President Kim, and I'd like to also express my gratitude to the East Asian Foundation for having me back to Jeju Forum on this very interesting panel with my dear friends. Speaking about the ASEAN's view on the China-US major powers rivalry, I'd like to first of all distinguish there are possible two dimensions onto it. First, there's a Southeast Asia individual countries dimension, and then there's a collective ASEAN dimension. And ASEAN's collective views might be more than the sum of its parts. I think that's the first point. It's important to know that individual Southeast Asian countries have very distinctively different relationship with the major powers, and therefore they might see the rivalry as well as their relationship with the major powers in a vastly different manner. Their interests also vary greatly when it comes to individual countries' relationship with the major powers. So you will see countries taking vastly different paths individually when they approach major powers competition. Philippines, for example, might take a much closer path towards the United States, whereas Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar might seem to get closer to China and benefit a lot more from building a closer relationship to China. Malaysia, Brunei might take what is seemingly described as an equidistance posture towards the major powers, whereas Singapore, Vietnam might take an equi-proximity, trying to build visibly closer ties with both of the major powers at the same time. Indonesia, on the other hand, is best described as taking an active neutrality posturing vis-a-vis the major powers, and so on and so forth. So individual countries, you can see that they have a very different strategy or different approach towards the major powers competition. However, ASEAN collectively might seem to be taking a somewhat different approach comparing to its individual states. I would say that the ASEAN sees both opportunities and challenges when it comes to this rivalry. However, ASEAN collectively like to speak more about the challenges and quietly reap the benefits of that rivalry. But then it's a fact that ASEAN does see there's opportunities in that rivalry as well. The major challenges that ASEAN collectively see in the major powers rivalry is the heightening tension on profiles such as the South China Sea, also on trade and competitions over high techs and so on. So the heightening tension is something that ASEAN feels it, and the push for ASEAN to make policy decisions which can be seen as hostile towards the other party is something that ASEAN feels or that challenges ASEAN. ASEAN also might have to to make increasingly difficult, have to manage the processes in a more increasingly difficult manner. The ASEAN is all about processes, and ASEAN would find that the processes that ASEAN manage, the East Asia summits, the ASEAN regional forums, the summitry, which is the core of ASEAN existence, is exposed to this rivalry increasingly more, making it more difficult for ASEAN to successfully manage the processes. Ask any ASEAN chair how difficult it is to agree or to get agreement on the ASEAN statement each year, and you'll find how tough it is to navigate through this different or opposing views when it comes to managing ASEAN processes. So those are some of the challenges that ASEAN is facing, but the opportunities which ASEAN talk less about is that it does provide ASEAN a bit more agency and relevance because all the major powers, as Mr. President rightly pointed out from the beginning, there seems to be increasing interest in courting ASEAN to its side and courting ASEAN support for the major powers policy. ASEAN also view that a bipolar or multipolar configuration is a lot better than a unipolar one, making it easier to breathe for the countries in the region. And so a certain level of competition, rivalry, is actually beneficial for the regional architecture. ASEAN also is reaping some economic benefits from this rivalry because of diversification effect, because there's increasing trade flowing into, or investments flowing into ASEAN due to a decoupling or de-risking attempt by the rest of the world, not wanting to be too dependent or overly dependent on China. So that's some of the benefits. So ASEAN collectively will want to manage the risk and maximize the opportunities. And it does so by airing its view, its vision for the open Indo-Pacific, and that's the outlook, ASEAN outlook on the Indo-Pacific, and they lay out the basic principles on how they would like the Indo-Pacific region to be, and that is an open, transparent, cooperative, inclusive region that excludes no one and threatens no one. ASEAN also wants to preserve its centrality, and somehow ASEAN believes that it really has the centrality in the regional architecture, something that might not be seen in Northeast Asia. And ASEAN believes so because they think that they have the geography, they have the economic edge, and the potential to be appealing as a leading economic growth region, something that you referred earlier as an epicentrum of growth in the Indo-Pacific. ASEAN also believes that ASEAN has the diplomatic network and the diplomatic skills to manage this rivalry. However, ASEAN also will also have to manage free riders, because there are free riders out there, even among ASEAN, who believe that they can extract even more benefits by having or being in ASEAN, but while at the same time also having their own deals with the major powers. Those tactics is going to benefit them in the short run, but however, is going to erode ASEAN overall strength in the long run. So ASEAN will have to deal with that, those free riders. And ASEAN also believes that it is possible to forge a non-zero-sum competition between the major powers in, at least in Southeast Asia. That kind of a competition, for example, to provide cheaper, better public goods, cheaper technology, for example, cheaper infrastructure. I think that kind of competition is going to be the kind of competition that is going to benefit Southeast Asia, that ASEAN believes that it can forge between the major powers. So I'll stop there and welcome the questions.
Thank you very much, Hong Son. Your focus is obviously ASEAN as a collective. Okay? But in my first question, I really would like to hear your thought on your country, Vietnam. Very subjective. Okay, we're going to go over to Professor Kwok Ching-shui. Ching-shui, please.
Kamsahamnida, Professor Kim, for your kind introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. Let me begin by thanking East Asia Foundation for having me here, joining this panel. And very glad particularly that I share this panel with my friends Karen, Hong Son, and also Jae-hyun. And what I'm going to do after hearing such effective, systematic, and comprehensive points from both Karen and Hong Son is that, which I agree, and what I'm going to do is echo and complement, hopefully, their excellent points by sharing three, I hope, simple, straightforward points. Hong Son, towards the end, talk about agency. It's an A word. So I thought my 3 points will be 3 A's. 3 A's that I hope to capture the kind of complex, ambivalent, and also a mixed feeling on the part of small, secondary, weaker countries in the region called Southeast Asia. So as I said, my views would complement a lot of things that has been highlighted. So how is that so? So the first point is about anxieties or apprehension. I know we have been hearing a lot of points about the benefits, the opportunities, which I completely agree. In fact, it's a kind of coincidence. Countries that are represented here, of course we are speaking on a personal level, Thailand, Vietnam, Malaysia, we are among those countries that have been benefited from the big power competition, from US-China trade, from China plus one, right? In many ways, semiconductor and EV and all that. So that is certainly true. But despite these benefits and opportunities, countries in the region still are anxious, still are apprehensive. You might ask, why is that so? Many reasons. It's mainly because of those things that we are benefiting right now are products of structural interactions between US and China. We know that if you have structure, it means that it's beyond us. We do not know for how long, for example, for how long we can still benefit from the interaction in semiconductors or many other aspects. And we are also feel anxious because of almost all of us, even big territories, big countries like Indonesia, Vietnam, feel vulnerable in so many ways. Vulnerable because of domestic problems, vulnerable because of big power pressure are increasing. Again, it's beyond our control, but it will affect us in more than one way. And the final issue that we should highlight about anxiety in Southeast Asia is that and that is something that I think is important to highlight since we are in Northeast Asia and not Southeast Asia, in the sense that some of the sources of anxieties, meaning the risks and the challenges, overlap with those in East Asia, South Korea, and Japan, and so on and so forth, but might not entirely be the same. Just take economic risk, right? We talk about decoupling, de-risking. It's merely to mitigate the risk of economic coercion, to mitigate economic coercion and also dependency. Those risks, those are sources of anxieties certainly shared by Southeast Asian countries, but a matter of fact is that in Southeast Asia, while we are shared those concerns about the risks, we are more worried about other kind of risks. We are more anxious about the risk of being entrapped. As the big power rivalry intensifies, the chances of entrapping us into the big power conflict that we do not choose, but will be affected, it's top of the list of risks of kind of entrapment. And we are also worried about the risk of abandonment. Many of us, it's only Philippines and Thailand are treaty allies of US. Many of us, we are not, but we are long-standing defense partners of US and also so-called like-minded Western powers. We are worried, there will always be a risk of abandonment, so on and so forth. So that is the first A that I would like to, that I'm sharing. Let me be quick, hopefully much quicker and hopefully more effective in my second A and also third A. The second A is about allergic to alliances. I know in Northeast Asia, South Korea, Japan particularly, because of different conditions, alliance is like the alliance first policy is a cornerstone of your external policy. In Southeast Asia, with the exception of Philippines, especially under the current president, all other countries are allergic to alliances in the sense that we might still have some alignment in one way or another. Some are stronger, closer than the others, but we do not think that the alliance should be the cornerstone of external policy. This includes Thailand, and Thailand is the other US treaty ally. And the way Thailand positions itself between Beijing and Washington, which is an indicator of the fact that you can be a US treaty ally, but you doesn't necessarily have to be adopting the alliance first policy. So we are allergic for alliance for a number of reasons, but I don't think we have time to elaborate, but hopefully maybe during the Q&A, this thing can be highlighted again. So the final point that I would like to highlight, the third A, is about authority. Authority in the sense that it's domestic authority on the part of ruling elites. My American friends like to tell me that all politics is local, meaning all politics is domestic. So how small countries in Southeast Asia and beyond, across even the global south, position between the competing powers in the form of US and China is not so much about whether we like any particular power, regardless of a political ideology or values, but it's a pragmatic reason that to what extent positioning vis-a-vis both US and China can help ruling elites' domestic political functions, which is to enhance and justify domestic authority. And therefore, you see a lot of pragmatism on the part of Southeast Asian countries. Pragmatism can be defined as, despite some disagreement and dislike feeling, a readiness to engage and partner with powers in one way or another. That is pragmatism. And this is a central theme, I think, on the part of Southeast Asian countries' external policy, that we are pragmatic enough to try to engage with both powers rather than one power against the other. This is reflected in not just economic, but also diplomatic, strategic, so on and so forth. I think I will stop here, and thank you very much for your attention. 감사합니다.
Well, thank you very much. You pointed out some, negative aspects of great power competition to ASEAN countries. Okay, thank you. And Jaehyun, you ready?
Yep. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jaehyun Lee from the ASEAN Institute. I'm in big trouble, actually. The topic of this session is the ASEAN's view and perspective on the superpowers and superpower competition. And these co-panelists are from Southeast Asia. And what can I add? You already heard the voices from the local people. And
Jaehyun,
yeah.
you are one of the renowned Southeast Asia experts in Korea. So you are
But I'm not Southeast
qualified
Asian.
to speak on behalf of ASEAN countries here.
The thing is, we heard the opinion from one of the most influential and productive writer on the political economy in Southeast Asia, Karen, and one of the most influential figure on the foreign policy and strategy in Vietnam, Hong Son, and the authority of hedging strategy, Cheng Chi. And what can I add here? So the only way I can provide some value to this audience is that they are comparing the Southeast Asian view and what we think in South Korea. Maybe in the round coming up, Professor Kim can ask some questions and I can answer my own view on Southeast Asia's perspective on superpowers and superpower competition. But as an introductory remark, I just would like to emphasize some point that I get by comparing Korean strategic perspective and Southeast Asian strategic perspective. The thing is, in South Korea, when we look at superpowers and superpower competition, it's all black and white, either China or US. We have to make a choice. Go for China or go for US. There's no kind of third options. There's no kind of neutral stance, gray zones or whatever. If you look at the famous survey done by Institute of Southeast Asia based in Singapore, they usually ask two very interesting questions which are not really common in South Korea. The first question is, in this strategic situation where the US and China compete each other, how the ASEAN navigates in this trouble, then the options are quite interesting. If you ask the same question in South Korea, it's, we have to go for China, or we have to go for US. There are only two options. But in Southeast Asia, some people say that, we are forced, we have to choose either China or US. But most of the people choose options like strengthening ASEAN as an institution, or keeping neutral stance between US and China, or making coalition with third parties. These three options are something like 92%. So the people who say we have no option but to choose either US or China is just 8%. If you ask the same question to South Korean people, 92% people would say, oh yeah, we have to choose between China or US. The remaining just 8% will navigate other options like making coalition with the third parties. So the point is Southeast Asia or ASEAN collectively is more flexible than South Korea in navigating this turbulent strategic situation. That's the first point. And another interesting question that the ISIS survey asks is, what would be the best option if Southeast Asia make coalition with third parties when Southeast Asian countries cannot rely on the United States or China? They think about Japan, Australia, New Zealand, UK, EU, South Korea as a third party options. I'm just wondering, in South Korea, have we thought about that kind of options? These are the initial remarks that I can make. I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jae-hyun. All distinguished panels, thank you very much for your very effective and efficient and strong presentations. You actually, I believe, touched upon very important issues when you brief presentations. Nevertheless, my first question, I would like to lower the level of analysis or level of observation one floor down. What do I mean? You mostly talked about the ASEAN as a collective, but in my first question, I would like to directly ask about your individual country. In your case, Karen, for example, could be Thailand or Singapore, right? Obviously, Vietnam, Malaysia. Okay, Jae-hyun, it's up to you. Okay. What does great power competition mean to your country? How would you assess cost-benefit calculation of great power competition, particularly to your country, not to ASEAN overall? That's a general level. We're going one floor down to your country. Karen? Be frank.
Okay, sure, definitely. Yeah. So yeah, maybe I'll speak from Thailand's perspective, which is the country that I'm originally from. Thailand adopts, the not choosing side strategy, and to assess the cost benefits of engaging both the U.S. and China, we see that China and U.S. are actually our major trading partners and investment partner too. We continue to engage them economically, even though there's rivalry going on between both of them. And also, we see more opportunities than negative effects as far as U.S.-China rivalry is concerned. One thing is that Thailand has been a major hub of production of cars and electrical and electronic products. So the parts and components of this product comes from China, are imported into Thailand from China, and we assemble into the final product and ship it to the U.S. market. So this is how Thailand see our relations as economic relation with U.S. and China. And in terms of challenge, as I mentioned briefly in my presentation, that we feel that as U.S. and China rivalry gets intensified, Thailand may be more pressure to choose sides, because certain products, even though it's come from China now, is subject. Certain parts of the commodity comes from China through China's supply chain. Is now subject to U.S. tariffs. So we feel the heat even more and more as the rivalry gets intensified. So that's I think what I would say about from my country perspective. Yeah, thank you.
So you're quite worried?
I'm quite worried, yes, yeah, because U.S. is now, I think, as I mentioned briefly in my remarks, that either or Trump or Biden wins the election, they're gonna get tougher on China, and probably comes in a form of more tariffs on more products, which could affect Thailand's supply chain.
So your overall assessment of great power competition to the effect of great power competition to Thailand is rather, negative.
On that one, it's a bit. We expect more risks on that.
I'm
on
sorry.
supply chain disruptions. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm urging very simplified answer. I'm sorry for that. Phung Son, how about Vietnam?
Right. Strategic rivalry is seen from Vietnam as not something new. Major powers have always been rivaling each other, competing with each other. What is new is that it's intensifying. And what is new is that the rivalry this time around is mostly between US and China. But it's not only just between US and China. In Vietnam's views, there are other major powers also in the play, which is Russia, for example, which Vietnam will also have to deal with as well, because we have very deep, long, traditional, historical ties with Russia as well. Secondly, we think that major powers rivalry is structural, is given. We have very little say in whether or not they will choose to rival or when they will cease to rival. It's something that's beyond our control. I fully agree with Chang Chu on that. So the question to us is how to navigate it, how to manage it, and what tools we have, how to survive the rivalry. I think those are the questions that we are asking ourselves. And in answering that questions, of course, we look for tools. And ASEAN always comes up as a very effective, and first thing we think about is ASEAN as a very important alliance, quotes unquotes, that we have to manage this powers rivalry. Thirdly, Vietnam's foreign policy is, of course, has always been, and I think is going to continue to be, try to preserve our independence and self-reliance. I think we have learned from our historical past that alignment with any of the major powers against another major powers wouldn't work for our benefits, wouldn't work for our interests, and so for now, I think the best path amid this rivalry is still to rely on ourselves and rely on like-minded countries, which in our case is ASEAN, is other middle powers like Korea, like Japan, if you so see the problem the same as we do. And we believe that there are a lot of like-mindedness in both Korea and ASEAN's view. And therefore, the survey is right, Jung-hee. It's right that we do think about other middle powers in working together in order to manage this rivalry.
Okay, thank you. Cheng Shui?
All right, thanks very much. Let me answer that question by focusing on Malaysia as a case, but still hopefully to relate to excellent points by all my colleagues. So 3 points that I would like to highlight on this issue is uncertainty, trade-off, and spectrum of policy choices. Uncertainty, I think, very much relate to what Hung Son mentioned about is a structural big power dynamics. It's not up to us, and uncertainty will continue to be there. And to relate to Karen, I thought the trade-off, right? It's a key issue in the sense that there is no free lunch. There will always be a risk and also a price opportunity cost of whatever you want to get. And then finally, I think Jae-hyun talked about the not kind of black and white. And this is where I think Southeast Asia's outlook is that we do not see policy options as either or. Rather, it's a spectrum. When we emphasize about ASEAN, it's not that the ASEAN is the only or sufficient tool. It's one of the many tools. And we say that earlier on I mentioned that there is no alliance first. It doesn't necessarily mean that we reject defense alignment. In fact, all these countries have multiple defense alignment in one way or another. And then there are also a spectrum in the sense that we are entering into a stage where the more uncertainty, the more we need the multiple tools rather than one over the other. With that, the setting, very quickly highlight the case of Malaysia. Malaysia's case is interesting to answer your question, Professor Kim, because of Malaysia is one of the countries in Southeast Asia which show a apparent shift from alliance first policy, alliance first, to non-alignment, equidistant, whatever you name it. First thing we did as a smaller country, a sovereign state in 1957, first thing we did is to join an alliance, and alliance first. No ambiguity, no hedging whatsoever. We joined, we put all our eggs in the Western basket for apparent reason, because the condition is such that there was a principal threat, communist threat internally and externally, and there was another condition, credible patron, alliance support, UK directly, US indirectly. So that alliance was critical to safeguard Malaysia's security for the first 14 years, 1957 until 1971. And it helped us in confronting, the pushing back communist threat, helping us to push back also Indonesians' confrontasi from 1963 to 66. But as many things in life, every good thing, effective things, and important things might come to an end beyond our control. So when British announced East or West in 1966-67, few years later, United States announced a Nixon Doctrine because of setback in Vietnam and all that. There was a time, a turning point for Malaysia and for many countries in the region that we can't afford to put all eggs in the US, in any big power as a basket, because things are uncertain. And all this happened before Trump 1.0 or the shadow of Trump 2.0. So it's one of the reasons why I mentioned that in Southeast Asia, we are allergic to alliance precisely because we learned from history that nothing will last forever. And geographically, some big powers are here forever. Because of that, we will have to be kind of pragmatic. And pragmatic means that you need to shift your policy when conditions change. But the fundamental kind of calculation is that we need to be pragmatic in doing three things: active, inclusive, and prudent. Active in underscoring the fact that we are neutral, we are not taking sides. Inclusive in making sure that as we diversify strategically and also economically, we diversify inclusively with almost everyone. And we are prudent also offset to make sure that when we have to say yes to big powers, both of them, we also need to say no to them in one way or another. Because keep saying yes will entrap us into a dependent situation. Keep saying no will push us into a confrontational situation unnecessarily. I'll stop here. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Inclusive, neutral. Well, that's very wise, and that I think is a very rational posture. But then, I do personally feel that it's easier said than done. Jaehyun,
Yep.
what do you think is the effect of intensifying great power rivalry in Southeast Asia on South Korea? Surprised?
Yeah, I'm surprised. I was thinking about the kind of option that pretending to be an Indonesian to answer your initial question, but you're asking the intensifying power competition and its impact on Southeast Asia and what it means for South Korea. As I mentioned in my introductory remark, South Korea needs to be more flexible in its orientation toward the superpowers. Then if South Korea goes beyond simple choices of either US or China, and South Korea can go beyond Korean Peninsula, we can find many friends, many countries. We can put our hands together to navigate in this turbulent strategic circumstances. And I believe my co-panelists mentioned South Korea a couple of times in their introductory remark and in the first question that there is some kind of expectation coming from Southeast Asia in navigating and in managing this superpower competition and its negative impact on Southeast Asia. But the theoretically, South Korean government and South Korean society in general is listening to Southeast Asia, but the problem is it does not. South Korean government and South Korean people does not really act to make a response to that sort of a demand or request or expectation coming from Southeast Asia. In South Korea, we tend to think Southeast Asian countries are, generally small and developing countries, and most of the South Korean people's number one security priority is threat coming from North Korea. So they often ask a question: if we build strong strategic cooperation with Southeast Asia, if we build security cooperation with Southeast Asia, would it be any help to address North Korea problem? South Korea has to go beyond the Korean Peninsula. The perspective that the outside Korean Peninsula have toward South Korea is not just a small and developing country. The South Korea has to have some role to play for the regional peace and stability and economic prosperity. We know that there's a kind of expectation coming from the outside, but we don't really act on that kind of expectation coming from the outside. If I add a little bit more on the Indonesian perspective, that would spend too much time. So let me just stop here, and if I have another chance, then I'll tell you the Indonesian perspective.
Wise decision. Thank you very much. Now we're going to go over to second question. Probably the great power competition in South Asia, not only in South Asia, but also in any other region, but particularly in Southeast Asia, could be seen in the perspective of a very classic balance of power theory, in which smaller state actors have usually two options: balancing or bandwagoning, i.e. taking sides either of the great powers, right? But we all know that both options come only at the expense of dependency, autonomy, and also both options carry the danger of, as Ching-Shui mentioned, carry the dangers of entrapment when great power competition spirals into unintended or intended clash or war, or abandonment, right? So I believe that the panels right here, they are very reluctant to take sides with either superpower, major power, but they appear to opt for some third option, i.e. hedging option, somewhere in between, hedging option. Hedging, but individual hedging, or the multi-alignment, if I quote Ching-Shui again, multi-alignment, some combinations of bandwagoning, balancing, and hedging, whatever. The individual hedging in this environment of great power competition would be, I think, it's a very rational option, because it's not only for the purpose of survival, but also for some, economic benefits, utilizing the great power competition. But my question is that, what about the stability and durability of regional balance of power itself? This is not an individual level story. At the whole macro regional level, there must be some kind of, particularly when great power competition is unfolding, just like now, then there must be some stable regional balance of power maintained, okay? This is totally different. I think a little bit different story from individual benefits, like individual hedging. So we're gonna do something to make a regional balance of power more stable and durable. And one of those things I believe is some meaningful collective action, as in the example of, say, for example, non-aligned movement in the previous century, although it turned out to be not so successful, some collective action. So what would you see the collective hedging, if we can call it collective hedging, okay, playing the role of stabilizer, or for that matter, if you like, a balancer of regional balance of power? What would you say to that possibility of collective hedging? Why don't we reverse in this time, starting all the way from Jaehyun?
Very interesting question, collective hedging. On your questions, and I got 2 points to make. First, on collective hedging, I'm not quite sure if Southeast Asian countries are conscious enough in their hedging strategy. The point is, the individual countries hedges between the US and China, but they don't really discuss this matter openly in the context of ASEAN. Hey, you Cambodia, you get close to China, and Philippines, you get close to the United States. Some countries take a neutral stance. They don't discuss, as far as I know, they don't discuss this sort of division of labor within Southeast Asia. The individual countries hedges. Individual countries get close to certain superpower, but as a whole, there is a kind of a very subtle balance within Southeast Asia, and I believe that is kind of a beauty that the ASEAN has in managing the superpower competition. So, given the Southeast Asian or ASEAN past tradition, it is kind of against their tradition to make an agreement or treaty to make a division of labor among themselves. And anyhow, but that balance is kept very beautifully among Southeast Asian countries. That's one point. And the other point I would like to make when it comes to balance of power, Southeast Asian countries combined cannot tilt the collective power cannot tilt the balance between the United States and China. Maybe they can be a force in the U.S. and China competition, but they cannot conclude the competition. But anyhow, Southeast Asian countries have to keep the balance of power within the region. For example, during the Cold War, it's Soviet and the United States. Today, it's between U.S. and China. When the U.S. and China, these two superpowers, keep the power balance in the Southeast Asian region, that creates room for maneuver for Southeast Asian countries. That creates autonomy for Southeast Asia. So the best option is the balance of power between the United States and China in Southeast Asia, as long as it does not develop into a clash, which is a kind of nightmare for Southeast Asian countries. If the US and China clashes in a military way, they don't fight in the US or in China. They probably fight in somewhere South China Sea or somewhere in Southeast Asia. And that could be a nightmare, a disaster for Southeast Asia. So when they keep balance of power in Southeast Asia, when they hedge, they always have this possibility in mind, unplanned clash between the superpower. I'll stop here.
Thank you. Ching-Shui?
All right.
So collective hedging, possibility of collective hedging?
Okay. 3 points. First point is to echo Dr. Lee's kind of excellent points, especially about the there is no division of labor, to use your word, and there is no division of labor among ASEAN countries. So collective hedging might be too kind of idealist, and then there is always a gap between kind of a desirability and also feasibility. And small countries realize that, which is why the
Then what about the often used notion of ASEAN centrality? Is it simply a fantasy?
That will be the second point that I'm going to raise, relate to ASEAN centrality. But first point again, there is not a kind of a clear, kind of like a cautiously planned division of labor. It doesn't exist. It will not exist. And but even though there is no coordination among ASEAN countries to use to what extent and how they should use the common platform to engage big powers, but they do converge to some extent, and they converge for a number of reasons, right? For a number of reasons in the sense that we all realize that earlier on we mentioned about vulnerability. We all realize that if we don't hang together on ASEAN, we'll be hanged separately. So that converge. You do not have to discuss and talk about it. It will not be in the ASEAN agenda, but everybody come to ASEAN, knowing that ASEAN is not perfect, ASEAN is insufficient, but is indispensable for all of us, right? So that kind of structural conditions, we are weaker countries for survival and for ruling elites to rule domestically. Every leaders in ASEAN capital wake up every morning not to think about South China Sea or Taiwan or US, China, or which power will prevail over 10 years or so. Leaders wake up every morning, think about domestic, domestic, and domestic. And that underpin the desired kind of intention for all of us, despite differences in political systems, despite size and all that, to make use of ASEAN as a platform to deal with external issues. And then I said, those are desired, but we realize that it might not be always possible because of big power interaction is structural issue. Second thing about ASEAN centrality. I think ASEAN centrality is being perceived, interpreted in so many ways, but you ask Southeastern countries, ASEAN centrality actually doesn't mean that ASEAN countries think that ASEAN centrality means that ASEAN countries will have to be the leader and driver on many things. We acknowledge that many things are beyond our control, but ASEAN centrality does mean that this is something that not only benefit ASEAN countries, ASEAN centrality. ASEAN centrality actually benefit all the partners, including the competing powers, in fact, including Northeast Asian countries. For example, RCEP. RCEP would not be possible without ASEAN centrality, without ASEAN being used as a platform. Yeah? So those are, again, that acknowledging that nothing is perfect and then something that desired might not be possible, but again, practical reason, pragmatic reason for survival as a weaker countries would force us to continue to emphasize ASEAN centrality, even though we know that almost all powers these days when they talk about ASEAN centrality are very much paying lip service, right? We do understand, but that would not push us to do otherwise. Final point about hedging. I know this is again like a controversial word and so on and so forth. Let me say a few words about hedging so that we can put things in perspective. Number one, hedging, it's a policy without pronouncement, meaning that all policies you have to announce, so that communicated and then you implement. Hedging, you don't do that. You don't hear any hedgers saying that, hey, I'm hedging, you know, because that would defeat the purpose, right? Hedging is to reduce, mitigate risk by saying that you're hedging, meaning that you're telling all the big powers that I don't trust you or I don't trust you always, right? They will increase the risk rather than mitigating the risk. And the other issue about hedging is that I know hedging is being perceived as kind of like negative, passive, sitting on the fence, opportunistic, speculative. Those are misunderstanding about hedging. Hedging is for survival. It's rather than like sitting on the fence, we are actually trying to mitigate risks that are beyond our control for as much as possible, right? So we need to be active, we need to be inclusive for that particular reason that choosing sides will only increase. Final point would be hedging is actually adaptive, not static. Nothing will stay forever. We already mentioned about the shift, right? Malaysia and many other countries. But it's adaptive in the sense that we would adjust this approaches, strategies accordingly, right? If certain powers' action become even more assertive and aggressive, of course you would shift by strengthening the alignment or even alliance option. We were there, and I won't be surprised if some countries will get back to that policy again. It really adaptive depending on what is going on, but we do not want to overdo it. I will stop here.
Thank you. You look like a worship of hedging option. All right, thank you. Hong-Son, your focus has been when you make a presentation as ASEAN as a collective.
Okay.
So, what is your take?
Right. I will have to agree with Jae-yeon and Chang Tri that ASEAN is indeed hedging, but by accident. ASEAN is hedging by accident.
ASEAN is hedging by accident.
Yes.
Well,
and
that's
the
very,
reason,
very philosophical.
Yeah. And the reason is that indeed there's no proactive intention by ASEAN collectively to hedge, but it is the collections of ASEAN individual policies that make ASEAN appear as though it is hedging. So I'd say that this is a passive hedging policy derived from the very opposite directions that many of its member states is taking. And if you take Chang Tri's theory on hedging, which is organizations or countries that takes opposite directions, policies, in order to safeguard its autonomy as the core elements of hedging, then ASEAN is indeed doing so. And ASEAN does so because, as I stated earlier in my presentation, that different countries have very vastly different interests vis-a-vis the major powers, and therefore it's not surprising that they might take different policy direction when it comes to that bilateral relationship. But collectively, ASEAN is well aware that the best chance of survival is to stick together. I again fully agree with Chang Tri that we ASEAN know well that there's only a limit to what extent our individual policy can go, but the common interest, the lowest common denominator, so-called, in ASEAN is for ASEAN to maintain and to hang together in order to survive this rivalry between the major powers. My second point is that ASEAN also do not think in terms of the balance of powers purely, as the theories suggest. ASEAN does have an interest of maintaining balance in the region, but ASEAN have a word for it, and this word was coined by Indonesia, rather famous ASEAN Foreign Minister Mati Netalagawan. He says that ASEAN tries to maintain dynamic equilibrium in the region. It's an equilibrium derived not just by hanging with one or two major powers, but by diversifying its relationship with all the major powers as well as the middle powers. And ASEAN realized this is they have a chance of maintaining this dynamic equilibrium because ASEAN geography and policy create the interest from the major powers and the middle powers in Southeast Asia. Think about the Indo-Pacific now. ASEAN is right at the heart of it. It's right at the center. And this geography provides ASEAN with the opportunities to forge linkages with powers near and far to maintain this kind of diversification of relationship that ensure that no major powers has an overwhelming influence in the region. And through that, a multi-alignment policy can be forged collectively by ASEAN as an organization, and through that, ASEAN also can maintain this balance of power. But it's also important to highlight that the balance of power, so-called, in ASEAN's view, is not just a balance of military power, as the West usually suggests. It's ASEAN thinks in terms of comprehensive powers that can derive from both hard power and soft power. And this has to be forged not just through an increased defense engagement, but also political engagement, economic engagement, as well as ideological and cultural, the kind of influence, the kind of powers or influence that you forge on the people and not just on the state. I think this very multi-layered, multi-dimension, multi-party relationship, which is creating the balance of power, if you want to call it so. Thanks.
Well, point well taken. Thank you very much. Last but not least, Karen.
Thank you for the question, Professor Kim. Yes, I just want to add on my few words to Dr. Nguyen's remark about the notion of security. In the region, we view security as a comprehensive concept. So we uphold the notion of what we call comprehensive security, which encompasses both hard security, military security, defense, as well as non-traditional security, which can range from climate change, human security, health security, etc. So I just wanted you to know that the concept of security viewing from the region is different from the hard security that is upheld elsewhere. Okay, I think the other panelists have said a lot about collective hedging at the regional level, so I probably add on to it by telling you the evidence of collective hedging at a sub-regional level in the region. We have the sub-regional area called Mekong sub-region, which actually consists of 5, the inland Southeast Asian countries like Cambodia, Myanmar, Laos, Thailand, and Vietnam. Right? So my study shows evidence of collective hedging in that sub-region. So someone studying the Mekong sub-region probably know that it has becoming a new arena for power contestations. If you look at the cooperation framework, the Mekong sub-region houses more than 12 frameworks, ranging from, Mekong ROK Corporation, initiated by Korea, Mekong-Japan Corporation, Mekong-US Corporation, and Langkang-Mekong Corporation led by China, right? So different powers are coming to Mekong sub-region and try to coin their own framework and set the direction of sub-regional development in their favor. So the question becomes, how do the mainland Southeast Asia bring back the development agenda to themselves, right? Because they're actually the local economy sitting there. So what they did is that they revamped the one framework called the ACMEC in short, it's ACMECS, or it's actually the full name is Ayeyarwady Chao Phraya Mekong Economic Cooperation Strategy, which is actually a economic development initiative among 5 mainland Southeast Asian countries: Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, Vietnam, and Thailand. So ACMEC is not a new initiative. It was launched in 2003, but in 2018, because of the power contestation that is going on in the sub-region, ACMEC was revised or revamped to help mainland Southeast Asian gain the benefits of infrastructure development in the sub-region. So ACMEC, the revamped version of ACMEC has evidence of collective hedging. If you look at the ACMEC master plan, it's actually an evidence of hedging, because if you look at the language of the master plan, is actually the guideline to guide the infrastructure development in the sub-region. If you look at the language, it tries to remain neutral. It tries to say that we work with different development partners, different non-ASEAN countries to roll out more infrastructure development. In ACMEC master plan, it put a lot of emphasis on cross-border infrastructure connectivity, and also focus on filling up the missing link between 2 economic corridors, linking port towns in Vietnam to port town in Myanmar. And this is actually an evidence of hedging, because if you look closely, the port town in Vietnam gave access to mainland Southeast Asia, access to South China Sea in the east, right? While port towns in Myanmar gives mainland Southeast Asia access to Indian Ocean in the west. Right? So ACMEC being framed that way help mainland Southeast Asian country better hedge against uncertainty, aka supply chain disruption, which could be caused by superpower rivalry. And I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much for bringing a good, hard evidence example of collective hedging to us. Thank you very much. Okay, time's running out, but then I definitely do like to open the floor so that our audience could join us in discussing the issue here. All right, we have a microphone ready here, out floor. Please make your identify yourself and make your comment or question very clear and short. Thank you very much.
Thank you. My name is Tom Lembong, and I'm a former trade minister and a former investment minister of Indonesia. And my question is, what would you say each of your countries should do or would do on the issue of Palestine?
Palestine, wow.
Because it
Tough
seems to be
question,
the
yeah.
issue that is polarizing
Uh-huh.
the global south
Right,
against the West,
right.
the G7, right? So after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, I think the West successfully garnered a lot of sympathy from around the global south for Ukraine, right? Like a developing country invaded by a giant, powerful neighbor.
Right.
But all that seems to be changing now, right? Because of the West and G7 backing of Israel, while the global south generally tends to be more sympathetic to the plight of the Palestinians, right? So what should be each of your countries or ASEAN's collective response or approach be at this time? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We're gonna gather a couple more questions, and you don't actually, our panels, you don't have to answer each question. You just volunteer to a particular question. Okay, so I see the gentleman, the back in there. Thank you for bringing such a hot issue to our panel.
My name is Hideshi Tokuchi. I'm from Research Institute for Peace and Security of Tokyo, Japan. I have a question to the panelists from Southeast Asian countries. And my question is about ASEAN outlook on the Indo-Pacific. The AOIP is a very crisp document and it covers many things, but it's very abstract. So my question is whether the AOIP is effective and meaningful as the guidelines for ASEAN's or ASEAN members' diplomatic efforts toward the other countries. I'm asking this question because many countries today, such as the United States, Japan, Australia, South Korea, and some extra-regional countries like several countries in EU, like the UK and France and Germany, have their own Indo-Pacific strategies or visions, and they are trying to align or they are trying to make synergy between their own Indo-Pacific strategy and ASEAN outlook. So is it possible to make, to generate synergy between AOIP and their own strategy? And also, as as I said before, is AOIP effective? Will it be an effective guideline for ASEAN's diplomacy?
Thank you. Well, our audiences actually have such a great raised such great questions. That means that I have to step down as a moderator. You guys should be here as a moderator. Well, I see a gentleman raising hand right over there. Yep. Microphone, please.
Thank you. Peter Lee from the ASEAN Institute. Thank you for that really interesting discussion. My question is actually quite simple. It's about how Korea's Southeast Asia strategy is evolving in response to great power competition. And so a big shift in the last 2 years in South Korea's Southeast Asia policy has been greater coordination with the United States and other like-minded countries. So if you look at the Camp David trilateral, if you look at what Korea's doing, a lot of Korea's Southeast Asia engagement now is coordinated with Washington, with Canberra, with Tokyo and other countries. So I'm curious from the Southeast Asian perspective, does that make a difference in what Korea does in Southeast Asia? Is it better? Is it worse? Is it more ineffective compared to what it was doing before, which was bilaterally just by Seoul's own thinking? Thank you.
Thank you. Any more question? One final last question, if any? Okay, no more questions. So we have 3 questions. We only have 11 minutes left. So who will volunteer for the first question, the Palestine? We could, multiple panels. Is it Tony question? Jaehyun?
Because I'm not Southeast Asian national, I can't give you answer that which way to go for the Southeast Asian countries. But what I can say is that the Palestine issue and Ukraine war and Myanmar, of course, and the Indo-Pacific, some countries still stick to the Asia-Pacific, and some countries go for Indo-Pacific within ASEAN. It could be, and countries have different ideas and solutions for South China Sea issue as well. So these are all kind of divisive element among Southeast Asian countries. And with this kind of development, you can say the ASEAN is in crisis. No way. The ASEAN has its own tradition of resolving differences among Southeast Asian countries. So when ASEAN countries first came in the 1967, you guys have resolved the issue of a military alliance, Thailand, the Philippines. And since then, ASEAN has faced so many challenges as a group of small and medium countries. But you overcame all these challenges and find a solution, and you maintained ASEAN as a regional organization. That is beauty of Southeast Asia and ASEAN as a regional organization. Stop here.
So what is the view on Palestine then? Any other panel?
Okay, let me respond to that.
Thanks, sir.
This panel is about major powers competition. So I think the first response on the issue of Palestine is we need to not looking at it as a major powers competition issue and try to focus on the real issue, which is the plight of the Palestinian people, humanitarian issues, and focus on looking at the real issues and remove the major powers influence, the ideological competition in that particular conflict. Allow me to also respond to the AOIP question, which is very interesting. I think the AOIP issued by ASEAN serves 2 functions. First, it is to say that ASEAN has its own narrative about the Indo-Pacific, which is joining the spree, the global spree on issuing Indo-Pacific strategy. Second, is to say that ASEAN's view on the Indo-Pacific is not an alignment with any other countries in the Pacific. It is about ASEAN's own view, it's about ASEAN's own region, and not an alignment of the Indo-Pacific strategy of any particular country, be it Japan or the United States. So I think if those are the 2 functions of the AOIP, then it serves its interest despite its lacking of detailed operative content. So my response to that is as such. On the final questions, does the ROK's recent shift in policy make any difference? I would say yes. The fact that ROK is engaging Southeast Asia strategically on security issue, ROK is looking beyond the DPRK issue and find that maritime security, cyber security in Southeast Asia has a direct relevance to ROK's interest, does make a difference, and we welcome that difference.
Thank you. Chung-Shui, you have 2 minutes to respond.
This is tall order. Very quickly, on Palestine issue, I would say that out of 10 ASEAN countries, 3 countries particularly are very having strong and also emotional reactions, right? Indonesia, Malaysia, Brunei, as Muslim majority countries. And this is really like not new. Before this Gaza thing and all that, the three countries has always been very kind of like critical about the issue. And you mentioned about Ukraine. And I remember there was a time that ASEAN countries in general are being criticized by the West, the mainstream. Like you are not too strongly like opposed or criticizing Russia, right? We're concerned about the Russian invasion of Ukraine because it undermines sovereignty principles, but we are kind of having reserve for a number of reasons. One reason is precisely what you mentioned, right? So countries do think that there is a kind of double standard or gap, right? The different reaction. Ukraine, of course, we sympathize. So we do see that it's very strong reaction about Ukraine, but we were comparing that we did not see the kind of reaction when it comes to the earlier conflict involving Muslim people, so on and so forth. So that's the first issue. And of course, I do want to think that there is larger implication in this kind of context. So these days, when countries, mainstream especially, talk about rules-based international order, right? So it's not convincing at all. It was not convincing before. It was not even convincing these days. How can you talk about rules-based by allowing what is going on in Gaza continue to happen? It's just kind of like, people are not convinced by all those narratives. So on the AOIP, I think the question is whether or not it is effective and all that. I would, quick answer would be everything is relative. I think if AOIP as a security function, I think it's kind of useless because we can't hope AOIP to manage South China Sea or many other things. But AOIP still have many kind of functions. For example, I think many in Southeast Asia will claim that AOIP saved the world Indo-Pacific. Because before AOIP in June 2019, Indo-Pacific was perceived like a code word for anti-China or containing China, right? Many kind of stay away. But with AOIP these days, you can see that the countries are adopting, but referring to AOIP's kind of spirit. You said it's abstract, but for us, it's not abstract. It's constructive, it is concrete, and it is inclusive that allow us to use the word synthesis, right? Other countries opposing camp can come use AOIP as the central platform for their own purposes. As long as you are competing, that's fine. For us, countries in ASEAN, we have no problem for big powers competing, as long as it's compete for cooperation. But if for competing for fighting, we do have problems. So finally, about the South Korea kind of stronger activism, I completely share with Hong Son and also others in the sense that we see a lot of possibilities. And some in ASEAN would like to say that the expanding and deepening ROK ASEAN cooperation, both at the group level and also individual countries, we are just seeing the beginning of a new phase. Because why? There is not much baggage between ASEAN and also Korea, and there are only lots of possibilities and also complementary and comparative advantage on the niche basis. I'll stop here.
Thank you. Karen.
Thank you. Yes, I'm given 2 minutes. 1.5 minutes now. Okay, so I'll concentrate on answering the last question, which is about South Korea policy towards ASEAN. I'm going to talk about the Korea-ASEAN Solidarity Initiative, or KASI. I think this is actually very positively viewed and welcomed by the regional state, but I would like to raise a few factors that could complicate the implementation of KASI going forward. So one is that it seems to be some maybe misperception, I'm not sure how to call it, but KASI, as it viewed from the region, may be different from what South Korea wants ASEAN to view. There's one study using content analysis to look at the major newspaper in ASEAN and how they talk about KASI. So KASI, as South Korean wants, is try to tame down the economic cooperation aspect and increase the security and socio-cultural aspect, right? But what KASI is viewed in ASEAN, among ASEAN through the newspaper, is that KASI is still put a lot of emphasis on economic cooperation. They don't see a difference between KASI and the previous new Southern policy. So that's one thing to note. It could affect implementation of KASI going forward. The second factor is that KASI implementation may get complicated because if South Korea is leaning more toward the US, then South Korea in ASEAN could lose its neutrality, and it may be difficult for ASEAN nation to buy into the CASI going forward. The third one is about South Korea domestic politics, because we know that foreign policy now is becoming more domestic because of the rise of social media and the conversation between government and its own population, right? ASEAN knows South Korea a lot, maybe largely thanks to K-pop, but do South Korean people know ASEAN? Because I know that CASI used a lot of funds from government budget, right, to implement this policy. How could South Korean government sell CASI to its own people to get support, right, to get more funding, to get support? That's going to be another question to think about. I'll stop here.
Thank you very much. Thank you. In the beginning of the session, I started, my first comment was that it's my great pleasure and honor to moderate this session as a non-expert of Southeast Asia. Throughout this session, I really, as a non-expert, learned many from our distinguished panels, but one thing very clear is that, wow, Southeast Asian countries and South Korea do really have many commonalities, important commonalities. That said, however, I also felt that our actual relationship, Korea, ASEAN country, has been lagging a little bit behind the need and commonality shared by our two parties, which means that there's a long way to go, and particularly on the part of South Korea, there's a lot to be done to fulfill expectations from Southeast Asian countries. Thank you very much. Please give big hand to our distinguished and great panels. We close the session. Thank you very much.